Ayman Tarabishi. I'm the President and CEO of the International Council for Small Business. I am delighted and honored to have you all here with Dr. Roger Matama. We apologize for the little bit of delay with the technology, but I think we all squared it away and we got lucky and with the internet gods. So with that, I don't want to delay anymore. Dr. Matama, thank you. Welcome back to ICSB. We loved our first session, but now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into family business. Why don't we go ahead and start? You can just tell me next slide, Ayman, and I'll move the slides for you. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. The next slide, please. Good. It's nice to come back to ICSB, and it's good. I hope the voice is coming out. I need some confirmation from Ayman. Is it on?
Yes,
very good.
Very smooth. Yep.
Good. Thank you so much. It's very nice. For a long time, we've been in business and family business, but the ICSB team decided to now ask an inquiry on family business in Uganda. And one would stop and first ask, what's the bother on family business in Uganda? As I always talk about family business, particularly for developing economies, these are entities that help economies to move very well. And you'll be seeing that they support in a number of ways, particularly in supporting the GDPs and also supporting the individuals that are within those economies. And let me now straight away go to the core thing, which is the main menu for our presentation. I'll give a historical nugget of business in East Africa, and in Uganda, and I'll tell you the uniqueness of our landscape, especially in East Africa. Then bring out the business advocates in Uganda. Then the family business drive in Uganda. Then the current situation, and I'm sure that is what is needed most, how the women, the daughters, the sons, and the founders are taking charge. Then bring out the internal and external stakeholders in a way forward, then conclude. If we move on to the next slide, let me start by telling you that in East Africa, and particularly in Uganda, the concept of business is rather a new concept. It's relatively new in a sense that if you not go back to the history of Africa, most of the transactions were always made on in form of barter. And so there was always exchange. You'd exchange goods for goods. And so the issue of equivalence, whereby you'd use currency, were marginal, were minimal. And if you noticed, most of the East African nations, like other parts of Africa, were colonized. And so the traction of business within East Africa, or the gravity of business within East Africa, is in line with the colonialism that occurred and which actually left the East African part of Africa within the 60s. Now, one thing we shall note as we continue is that Kenya, unlike the other East African nations, seemed to get more traction, more force in business. But mind you, I haven't tackled the issue of family business. I'm actually still bringing a precursor on business. And if we might, I would like to show you that with Kenya being next to the Indian Ocean, and of course Tanzania, we find that Kenya benefited a lot. But again, the traction is not only about the closeness to the Indian Ocean, because you'll discover that Tanzania, which is close to the Indian Ocean, does not enjoy what Kenya seems to indicate in line with business, which I will be sharing with you shortly. So can we move on to the next slide? Now, coming to Uganda, Uganda is very unique in its own way. After the 1960s, the early 1960s, after the colonialists left the economy of Uganda, we see that some of the Asians and the other foreigners who had come into the country called Uganda had to leave in the 1970s. During that time, there was the drive to make the indigenous own their own businesses and own businesses within Uganda. Now, we see in the early 1980s that some of the businesses that had been left in the hands of the non-owners then started collapsing. So in the late 1980s, we now see some changes whereby after the changes of government, we discovered that there was revitalization of the private sector. And as you'll see in the next slide, we see that some powerful entrepreneurs, especially James Murwana, who were came up powerfully, started pushing for some organizations that were very, very fundamental. For instance, the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda, the Uganda Manufacturers Association, and he himself, having started the Uganda Batteries, the NICE, then JESA, we see that there was some heavy drive. But there is also an individual, very special in the sense that having studied in India and came back to his home, who is none other than Juma Wasu. Actually, this is currently the principal of Makerere University Business School. When he came back in the 80s, he joined Makerere University as a teaching staff, but he joined a landscape which had that background, which I've just explained. Now, he moved ahead to push the business education, private support, sponsorship, but also advocated for advancement in business. Mind you, at that time when he joined in, most of the courses at higher degree, at a higher level, were being funded by government. So he moved on to allow for those individuals at university. Now, from there, we see a lot of advancement. Now, as we were progressing, I had a chance to interact with especially Rwanda, and of course the principal then where I studied the business school from the faculty up to Makerere University Business School. But I had a chance to meet Murwana, the late Murwana. So he gave me a lot of energy to move on into the issue of family business. But as I was moving into the issue of family business, I discovered that family businesses were actually complex. And actually this justifies why most people do not understand. And that's why people tend to misconceive what family businesses are. And to me, I've been running with this definition, and I always tell people that it's not necessary by blood that you define the family business, because I always say that beyond the founder of the family, where it's wife and husband, those two are not blood related, yet they are the founders. So now let me go a little bit deeper into Kenya. Let's move on to this slide. Now, the traction. If you remember, I've just told you that Tanzania and Kenya have a bordering towards the Indian Ocean. And in that case, you see that whereas Tanzania and Kenya share the border to the Indian Ocean, you see that Kenya seems to be so, if I may just mute this microphone. Okay, Sorry for that. There was a young man crying. It's a young Matama crying. So as we progress, we discover that the contribution of family business owned entities towards the GDP, we see that within the East African region, Kenya seems to be #1. Now, Tanzania, you can see Tanzania and Uganda seem to be in the same range when you look at, if you look at this color, the yellow portion, you see that Kenya is doing very well in issues of family business contribution towards the GDP. Now, if you move on to the next slide, now in Uganda again, family business is at that time when before I wrote this book in 2005, the family business was seen to be the center of conflict, the center of stress, and even leading to failures. And people would just say, as long as you run a business and you put in a family, then that is the end of it. So, in fact, by the time I wrote the first book in family business, I didn't have a family, or I didn't have a wife. And so my colleague at the university told me, how can you write about business, family business, when you do not have a wife and children? And I coined something for her, and I told her, actually that time she had 3 children. I told her that you need not to carry a blackboard in order to be identified as a teacher. She had forgotten that I belonged to a family. I had mother, father, others. So in 2010, Makerere University Business School gave me a meritorious award for promoting family business knowledge. I moved on to write another book in 2012. I moved on to do a PhD in the line of cohesion and financing in family. Again, in 2020, recently ICSB requested for me to do something on family business sustainability. So if we go to the next slide, we now look at our country, especially tax collections. Recently in 2018, I landed on an article which indicated top 300 rich Ugandans who are contributing largely to the GDP. You'll be surprised that most of the people who are there, most of the farms that are there are family related and family oriented. There's one, for instance, Sekarara. This is one of the senior, in fact, I put this into the same range like the late James Murwana. Sekarara with Yugachi contributed close to 0.8 of a million US dollars, with 3 billion Uganda shillings. Gastarule is in line with confectionery and contributed 2.7 million US dollars in that time in 2018. We see so many others who are purely contributing to the GDP of our economy. For instance, Aponye Uganda Limited in line of logistics, mega supermarkets, the equivalent of Walmart in UA, so others. So the significance of family business cannot be downplayed. So if you could move to the next slide. Now, uniquely, Uganda has a very unique population structure. If you looked through, the total population of Uganda is 40.8 million. Now, interestingly, unlike most of the other countries, 55%, more than half of the Ugandan population is below 18 years. And the men and women have unique affinity towards the children. It is seen that the men prefer to have more children, and the range is very far from what the women also work. So you find that on an average size of a family, you find that 5.7 preferred by men and 4.8 preferred by women. Now, The labor force, we are saying 80% of the population involved in agriculture, 80% is involved in agriculture. And that's why you see that most youths are engaged in family businesses directly or indirectly. Now, in that range, when you look at this pie chart, you see that more than half is young. In fact, if you see the next slide, Uganda is ranked as amongst one of the countries that has the youngest population. So with a median of 16.7 years. Now, what does this explain? This explains that there is that kind of orientation whereby the children are already in things, and we have a young base of the population that must be utilized for purposes of longevity of our businesses. So if we move to the next slide, the business traction in Uganda. Now, if you noticed in June, when you asked me about the question of gender categories, I mentioned that we had in Uganda, we still have and sons. We have X and sons, Y and sons. I used these letters not to mention the names here, but I want to assure you we have so many names here where we add there and sons. But I want to show you I have not seen the one with and daughters. Neither have I seen, well, a few of them are now here and family, but very, very scarce, very trivial. You can't easily see them. Now, recently, Professor Wasabarunywa indicated to us that most of the causes of conflict is the ego. Now, I will add that sometimes the masculine ego, whereby you find that as a man, as a patriarch, you think you're the one to charge most of issues, would be one of the causes of failing of our businesses, particularly in family-oriented businesses. And by the way, this patriarchism mentality is one of the causes that is even making people even fail in families, whereby, for instance, if you've not produced boys, you end up going to look for boys in whatever form, and you maybe even squander your wealth through that process. Then we have so many Asian descent family businesses. In fact, some of them are successful, and we can see entities like the Madvani Group, the Meta Group, the Alican Group, the Bidco. These are having heavy traction and are contributing significantly to our economy's support. Now, we also see indigenous founders doing classic succession systems. I will again mention the James Murwana entity. James Murwana died in 2013. But as of today, when you look at how the entities have moved, if you maybe go back to the other slide before. Thank you. James Murwana passed on 2013. But as we move on, we see that over 6 years down the line, the business is robust. Unlike the other entities that we were always seeing, I will not mention some of them, where the founder would die the first year, the second year, you just see everything just appearing in the newspapers, being liquidated and all that. Now, we also see a number of entities coming up, and I will tell you, for instance, one of them, the biography about himself moved on. So now, going to the next. If we can go to the next slide, can we kindly go to the next slide?
Is this good, or you want another slide?
Unique, yes, no, this is okay. This is okay.
Okay.
Uniquely, you find that in our country, we have women taking charge. We see women now taking the lead in family businesses. We see, for instance, the Sarah Murwana, the wife to the founder of Nice House of Plastics, now together with the daughter, Barbara Murwana, handling very, very well the Murwana group. And by the way, this is not a small group. It is full of a number of entities. And this is based in the capital city in Kampala. We also see a daughter of one of the founders of Aponyo Logistics taking charge. We see Maggie Chigozi, one of the historical women in this country, taking charge of their family businesses that is in line with coffee. And this is based within Uganda region. This is a little bit closer to the capital of Kampala. Shakila Kaganda, within an up-country area, handling a Mugamba farm. Daughters and son of Gasta Rule, taking charge of Ntake Group. Uniquely, Hajat Sarah Chiyimba, taking charge of the businesses that were left to her, together with the son. We also see in the north, the far north of the country, see young charge of Spend Raiders Hotel. To me, the something unique we see in our country. We see angle. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, move on. We need to be a little bit to the stakeholders, especially the internal stakeholders. When I refer to the internal stakeholders, I'm referring to the founders, the children, the other distant people, but close to the family. So first, they need to appreciate the fact that there's most of them still in the first generation. And when the successes are highlighted in the first generation, yes, they are there, they are good, we should celebrate, but they are not long lasting. Now, we also see some going to the second generation, which is okay. And actually, I see some of the entities are a little bit moving in there. Then we have scarce of them going to the third and the fourth generation. Now, mind you, successes in family businesses are seen at succession. If you've transited from one generation to another. Now, we see some entities which are now having robust systems like the ones I've just mentioned. But again, businesses, family businesses need to appreciate the fact that there is the negative and the positive sides of familyness. Because favoritism can always be observed. So these things that we need to know are internally. But let's go to the external, which is in the next slide. Family business, good. Thank you so much, Aina. Now to the external, which I think is a big problem, because we need not to take the family businesses for granted. Now, these family businesses need some unique support. The support in form of finances and other resources. Now, recognition as unique business entities. These entities have unique problems, complexity of problems. So they need support. Now, that's why I'm saying cushioning from the strict capitalistic quid pro quo mentality. Now, this seems to be a very heavy statement, but I'm now saying that there are some elements that there should not be now the capitalist angle only, but we also look at them in the social perspective, because there are some people are not educated, but they have volunteered to take charge. And also the other angle that I will also mention is the fact that you now bring out the issues of conflict of interest on the forehead, say, no, you have not separated, or children are taking account, or the children are taking of what. Now, because of the nature of the family business, times the governments come and shield them and cushion them to just not be taking the capitalist quid pro quo mentality. And also there should be separation of power, separation of duties, and all that. Now, related to that, we need to borrow a leaf from the powerful entities that we see in the world, and from Asia and some in Europe, and also some in USA, by the way, because I know that Walmart was supported in their way. Now, India supported Tata. Recently, remember, you indicated that entities like LG and Samsung were supported by those governments. Then Japan, we also see that Toyota, in the family of Toyota, were in a way supported by governments. We know that German supported Mercedes-Benz in a way. So now, all these must be well utilized such that these indigenous entities that are here are well cushioned. Now, again, the business schools, which already have some of them, I know that the business school, Makerere University Business School, has an incubation center, a hub. These should take the lead in supporting the family business drives. Then, no, actually, recently I was consulted about the support that the private sector foundation is now moving very fast to support family business. The Uganda Investment Authority, the Uganda Manufacturing Association, all these, we need to know that they are moving on very well. So let's move on to the next. Now, I cannot conclude before mentioning the uniqueness of ICSB. First, for highlighting our humble efforts, particularly what I've been doing on family business. I do appreciate your recognition of my simple support in family business, especially those intellectual efforts. Then re-energizing our efforts on more family business studies. I remember the other time you requested that we should do more work. And the kinds of collaborations will help in globalizing our family businesses. So let's move to the last slide. As I conclude, I would like to indicate that family businesses are being seen in diverse sectors, largely in the agricultural sector in Uganda. However, there is limited publicity of the successes of family businesses in Africa and also in Uganda. Uganda's large population is directly benefiting from family businesses, and also we need now to move more to galvanize and even do more researches on Uganda's perspectives of family businesses. And so far, I'm really discovering a lot about, for instance, patient capital in family business. Thank you so much for listening to me. I know the internet was not on our good side, but Ayman, we need to clap for you for having done the rightful updates. Thank you so much, Ayman.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. This has been an exceptional presentation, and sometimes you say less is more. We had less time, but we had more and more great knowledge being contributed here. This is really fascinating here. And what I've noticed here, and it's funny I mentioned this because I was thinking about it last week. In the United States last week, or maybe 10 days ago, on national TV, they celebrated the Emmys. And are you familiar, Matama, what the Emmys are? They are an equivalent to the Oscars, okay? And the Oscars are when you award for a show or an actor for best acting or best screenplay, or right? But what was
Yes.
fascinating for
Yes.
this year's Emmys is one of the shows that won for best show or best series. The title of the show was called Succession, right? And
Aha, good.
and the whole show, now it's in its third season, talks about the challenges and the drama behind a family business and the succession between the father or the patriarch and the children. Okay, this
Mm,
has won for best screenplay and best acting as well. I believe
mm,
I believe that this is not just the case in the United States, but I think this plays across the UK. I know in the UK there was a headline news a couple of months ago. The ones that own the is it the Waldorf Astoria, Nigel? What's the one on close to Piccadilly Street, the major hotel there, the Ritz? Is it the Ritz or the Four
It's
Seasons?
the Ritz is the one there. Yeah, absolutely on Piccadilly.
Yeah, the Ritz, which is two brothers that have been always very conservative, very quiet, shy from the media, have a full blown out war on media about selling the Ritz and the niece or the nephew getting involved. Is that correct, Nigel?
I think it is. There was certainly a session. There's quite a few of these brothers in British business who are very secretive.
Yeah,
There's some
so
newspaper industry as well.
and they own the newspaper, they own the conservative newspaper, and they own the Ritz, and they're trying to sell it. So, Matama, where is this heading? Because it doesn't stop. It's like a record that keeps playing over and over and over again. And even in Uganda or that, how do you see this? How will we ever get better? What do you think?
You're very right. Succession is always like a tomb in family business. And, we were surprised recently to see one of the businesses that we're always appreciating as one of the organized entities. We saw it on the headlines, and there were brother and sister trying to fight over some issues of succession. Well, it's as long as it's a family business, that time bomb must always be recognized. However, the semblance of the family business members must also be appreciated. And asset grabbing sometimes is actually one of the issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why perhaps we are seeing in Kenya, because of the Kenyans, as I told you, our neighboring country called Kenya, has learned a lot from the neighbors who came from out and worked from there. But also largely, when you were mentioning, you never mentioned about China, India, Japan. Now, there seems to be some solidness in succession when it comes to these Asians. So those basics of succession seem to be well-grounded. And in fact, if you're reading details about family business, you see some weighty succession advantages towards the Asian landscape than other parts of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. But I remember also in India, the two brothers that owned the conglomerate, the steel, and that also had a big fight, and the mother had to step in to interfere because they were fighting each other. But this is in every country. You get to see some of these fights here. Let me ask you from an education perspective here.
Yeah, but before you do that, you can hear the mother had to step in. In other countries, even the mother does not have the volume to be heard. So something very interesting. Yes, please.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That I flagged the mother,
Yes.
and yet not all mothers. Yes. But let me ask you this question:
Yes.
Should then in societies, like I'll give you an example.
Yes.
Mexico has the highest density of family businesses in the world.
Yes.
98, most of businesses in Mexico are family-owned businesses. So then, should this then be a national initiative where universities and colleges have a course on family business that is mandatory?
This is a very interesting remark. It's very interesting. Now, you're right. Mexico is in that line and has a lot of family businesses. The density is high compared to other countries. But you see, now the capacity to nurture businesses, and if we were to succeed, it makes life much easier if we had families acting as hubs for business.
Yeah.
Because now, if I am not saying that all universities should force that, but those business schools should, in a way, and governments actually should come in to try to stimulate, especially those populations that are so big and have limited land, to stimulate, because you will agree with me that you've seen some people who are medical doctors, who are shifting from that and running business.
Yeah.
You've also seen that they are more interested now in business. So now we're not saying we should make everyone start a business, but we can utilize that element and utilize families to become hubs, small universities, micro universities, to support these nurturings of these individuals. And by the way, it is also in a way helping these individuals to grow and live in the business world, because I know now the whole world is full of business.
Yeah. There was a quick question. There was a
Yes.
quick question here from Nasu. You mentioned patient capital. Can you
Aha.
elaborate on the role of patient capital in family business in Africa?
Okay. Now, patient capital, recently I managed to do some study in the northeastern part of our country. We have some groups of people called the Karomajongs. Now, I discovered that the original African settings promoted this kind
Okay. We lost you.
of patience. You do not just sell anything of land or what. Are we still on?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, in a sense that people or families will not just sell, for instance, a piece of land anyhow, or sell animals anyhow. They would have to reserve and keep some for the future. Now, within that territory, I discovered that there was that kind of manifestation, and unlike other settings where patient capital is actually referred to those equity capital and all that. Now, in our settings, I discover that the patient capital is actually withheld in animals, in cows, and in land. So this element, if well preserved, together with the knowledge that we're seeing in the stock markets, could bring out the uniqueness of our settings in Africa.
This is good.
That's what I have to answer on that.
Good. With that, I want to stop now before we abuse the technology. Matama, I want to thank you on behalf of ICSB and everybody.
Welcome.
This has been wonderful. We have this recorded for everybody, so we'll play it. And I want to thank you again. And then maybe you want to just briefly say that soon we'll be doing more work with Matama, so we're very excited. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Please stay safe, and I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Very good. Take care. Bye-bye.